The blue lights hit your rearview mirror before your brain even processes what just happened. Your stomach drops. You glance down at your speed, your hands tighten on the wheel, and that quiet voice in your head starts running through everything you might have done wrong in the last 30 seconds. You pull over, engine still running, heart beating just a little faster than usual. The officer steps out of the cruiser, adjusts something on their vest, and walks toward your window with a calm, practiced pace. You already feel like you're being watched, measured, evaluated. Then it happens. You instinctively reach for your phone, and the officer immediately says, "Go ahead and put that phone away." Now let me ask you something, and I want you to actually think about it. Have you ever been pulled over and felt unsure about whether you were allowed to record, stay silent, or even question what the officer was doing? Drop your experience in the comments, because what most people think they know about this moment is often incomplete, and there's something important about that exact phrase, "Put that phone away," that almost nobody fully understands until it's too late. And I'm going to walk you through it in a way that might change how you handle your next traffic stop. Because this moment right here, this tiny interaction, is where a lot of situations either stay routine or quietly start to spiral. Let's slow this down. When an officer tells you to put your phone away, your instinct might be to comply immediately. And sometimes that's the safest choice, depending on how the situation is unfolding. But legally speaking, that command isn't always as straightforward as it sounds. In most situations, you do have the right to record police during a traffic stop. That's been supported repeatedly in federal courts. Recording in public, including your own interaction with law enforcement, is generally protected under the First Amendment, as long as you're not interfering. But here's where things get tricky, and this is where people make mistakes. The law protects your right to record. It does not protect you from the officer interpreting your behavior as suspicious, uncooperative, or potentially threatening. That distinction matters more than most people realize. From the officer's perspective, they're walking up to an unknown vehicle. They don't know who you are, what your intentions are, whether there are weapons in the car, or what kind of emotional state you're in. Every movement you make before they even reach your window is being processed. Hands on the wheel? Good. Sudden movements? Not good. Phone in hand, pointing in their direction? That can go either way. You might think, "I'm just recording for my protection." And that's valid, but the officer might be thinking, "Why is this person grabbing something instead of keeping their hands visible?" That's where tone and timing start to matter more than rights alone. Now let's go back to that moment. Put that phone away. If you immediately argue, raise your voice, or say something like, "I have a right to record you," you're not necessarily wrong, but you might be escalating the situation in a way that works against you. So what should you say instead? Something calm, something controlled, something that asserts your position without triggering unnecessary tension. A response like, "Officer, I'm not interfering. I'm just documenting the interaction," keeps things grounded. It signals awareness without aggression. Or even simpler, "I'd prefer to keep it recording for my safety." Notice what's happening there. You're not challenging authority directly. You're framing your action as a safety measure, not a confrontation. That matters, because officers are trained to respond to perceived threats, not just legal arguments. And the moment your tone shifts into something that sounds combative, even if your words are legally accurate, the entire dynamic changes. Now let me take you into a scenario that happens more often than people think. You're pulled over late at night. Maybe it's a quiet road. Maybe there aren't many cars around. You start recording as the officer approaches. They see the phone. They immediately tell you to put it away. You hesitate. That hesitation alone is something they notice. "Sir, I said put the phone away." Now your brain is racing. Do you comply? Do you push back? Do you say something? This is where people often make a subtle but serious mistake. They start explaining too much. "I'm just recording because last time I got pulled over something happened and I don't trust." Stop. The more you talk in that moment, the more you give the officer something to analyze, question, or build on. Officers are trained to listen for inconsistencies, nervousness, and unnecessary details. What feels like harmless explanation to you can look like evasiveness or anxiety to them. Silence, used correctly, is powerful. But silence alone isn't enough. It has to be paired with calm behavior. If you decide to keep recording, keep your movements slow and visible. If your phone is mounted or already in place, that's ideal. If you're holding it, that's where things get more complicated, because now you're dealing with perception again. Is that phone? Is it something else? Why are they holding it? This is why preparation matters more than reaction. A mounted phone changes the entire dynamic. It removes ambiguity. It shows you're not grabbing or reaching. It reduces the officer's suspicion before it even starts. Now let's talk about something that almost nobody discusses openly. Officers sometimes use phrases like, "Put that away," not as a strict legal command, but as a control tactic. That doesn't mean it's malicious. It means they're trying to manage the environment. A traffic stop is unpredictable. The officer's goal is to maintain control of the situation. Anything that introduces uncertainty, like being recorded, can make them adjust their approach. Some officers are completely comfortable being recorded, others aren't. And their reaction can depend on their training, their department policies, or even their mood that day. That's the reality. So when you hear that command, you're not just dealing with the law. You're dealing with human behavior, perception, and authority dynamics all at once. Now here's another situation. The officer takes your license and registration. They go back to their car. Minutes pass. Then more minutes. Your phone is still recording. When they return, their tone has changed slightly. "Where are you coming from tonight?" You answer briefly. "Where are you headed?" You answer again. Then they ask the same question slightly differently. "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" This is where recording becomes even more important, because repetition of questions is a common tactic. Officers are trained to look for inconsistencies. Even small changes in your answers can raise suspicion in their mind. And here's the part people don't realize until later. Your own words, said casually under pressure, can become the basis for further investigation. "I had one drink earlier." That one sentence can extend the stop. "I'm just tired." Now they're observing your eyes, your speech, your coordination. Everything builds. And if you're not recording, you don't have an exact record of how that conversation unfolded. But again, recording doesn't protect you if your behavior escalates the situation. Now imagine this. The officer suddenly says, "Step out of the vehicle." This is lawful in most traffic stops. The Supreme Court has allowed officers to order drivers out of the car for safety reasons. But here's where tension spikes again. You're holding your phone. Do you keep recording? Do you put it down? Do you argue? If you step out while holding the phone in a way that looks unclear or sudden, you risk creating a perception issue. If you refuse to step out because you're focused on your right to record, you may escalate into a situation that becomes about compliance rather than your original stop. This is why understanding priorities matters. Your safety comes first. Your rights matter, but how you assert them matters just as much. Sometimes the smarter move is to comply in the moment and address any violations later. That's not weakness, that's strategy. Now let's shift to something subtle but critical. Passengers. A lot of drivers don't realize how much passengers can complicate a traffic stop. If a passenger starts recording loudly, asking questions, or challenging the officer, the entire tone changes. The officer now has multiple people to monitor, multiple voices, multiple movements. That increases tension. And sometimes the driver gets held responsible for the overall situation. So if you're driving, you need to understand that your passenger's behavior can affect you directly. Now let's talk about body language. This is something officers are trained to read instantly. Hands visible, movements slow, voice steady. If your voice cracks, if your hands shake, if you avoid eye contact too aggressively or stare too intensely, these are all things the officer notices. They may interpret nervousness as guilt, even though plenty of innocent people are nervous during traffic stops. but perception becomes reality in that moment. That's why your tone matters when responding to, "Put that phone away." If you sound defensive, you create friction. If you sound calm and measured, you keep the situation grounded. Now here's something that might surprise you. There are situations where an officer can lawfully restrict your recording. Not because recording itself is illegal, but because of how it's being done. If your recording interferes with the officer's duties, blocks movement, or creates a safety concern, they can order you to stop. And if you refuse in that context, you could face charges related to obstruction. This is where people get caught off guard. They think, "I have a right to record, so I can do it however I want." That's not how it works. Rights come with boundaries, especially when they intersect with safety concerns during an active police interaction. Now, let me bring you into a scenario that feels minor, but can turn serious quickly. You're polite, you're calm, you're recording. The officer seems slightly irritated but continues the stop. Then they say, "Do you mind if I take a quick look inside your vehicle?" This is a turning point. If you say yes, you've just given consent, and that changes everything. Your recording won't stop a search you've agreed to. If you say no, the officer might shift tone again. Why not? Got something to hide? That question is designed to provoke a response. If you react emotionally, you might say something you didn't intend. If you stay calm and say, "I don't consent to any searches," you've asserted your rights clearly. And if you're recording, you've documented that refusal. That combination, calm refusal and documentation, is powerful. But again, tone matters. Everything comes back to tone. Now let's circle back to that original phrase, "Put that phone away." What you say in response isn't just about the law. It's about control, perception, and outcome. You're not trying to win an argument on the roadside. You're trying to get through the interaction safely without creating unnecessary complications. Sometimes that means choosing your battles. Sometimes that means complying in the moment and addressing issues later. Sometimes that means calmly asserting your rights and holding your ground. But it always means staying aware of how your behavior is being interpreted in real time. Because once a situation escalates, it's very hard to bring it back down. And most people don't realize they crossed that line until they're already dealing with consequences. So the next time you see those blue lights and your instinct is to grab your phone, just remember, what you do in the first few seconds shapes everything that follows. Not just legally, but psychologically. And that's the part nobody teaches you until you're already in it.